Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I'm John Krause, CEO of RMI. Today is an exciting day for us. We have a record number of guests joining us to discuss clean energy solutions and the importance of developing the next generation of leaders in this space. It brings to mind a phrase that resonates deeply with us at RMI: applied hope. It's the idea that optimism, when paired with practical action, can drive meaningful change. And it's how RMI has thrived over the last 4 decades. Seeing so many of you here today strengthens that hope that together we can put more solutions in place quickly to benefit communities around the world. I'm especially grateful that we're joined by RMI Trustee Martha Brooks, who will moderate today's discussion. Martha, thank you so much for your leadership on our board and globally. We're lucky to have you as a partner in mission and excited for today's exchange.
Thanks so much, John. As John said, I'm a member of the board of directors of RMI and also chair of the development committee on behalf of the board. And as a moment, just to explain why I'm here, I've been honored to add my efforts to those of RMI after a 30-plus year career in heavy industry and all kinds of hard-to-abate sectors: aluminum, engines, construction, transportation. I have a really good sense of how hard it is to make the transition in the real world to a zero-carbon future. And I have come to the conclusion that RMI is absolutely uniquely placed to help all of us on this journey and really work through the system challenges industry by industry. Secondly, over the past 15 years, I've been deeply involved with an INGO named CARE, working on issues of global poverty, and particularly as they affect women and girls, and also human disasters. And what I've come to understand is the importance of clean energy to the economic development and human well-being across the whole developing world and the developed world. And RMI has taken up this challenge as well and is already making a very real difference in many of the environments around this world, both economic and environmentally. So for those 2 reasons, I'm particularly happy to be here. I want to welcome all of you to this effort as we work to live into our mission to transform the global energy system to a secure, clean, prosperous, zero-carbon future for all. We are grateful to our supporters, our partners, for their investment in RMI. We could never do this work without you. Our individual donors, our corporate donors, our foundation funders, and especially our Solutions Council and Innovators Circle, who have been really key in their leadership support to RMI. We have many on the call today, many who are brand new to RMI and many who have been with us a long time. The statistics I just got, just checking, 39 countries on this call and 45 states are represented. So it's a pretty big footprint, all of you, and I really thank you for being here. I want to also recognize our great speakers who are coming on, and I think they're probably the draw for why you signed in. First of all, Taylor Krause, who has been moonlighting on the side as the star of the most watched show in history, Love is Blind, but she will be discussing her work to promote clean hydrogen in the United States. And Ian Welch-Phillips, whose work in the Caribbean is helping many communities and countries build solar and battery projects. And finally, the real star of the show, Sir Richard Branson, who has made it his lifelong commitment to remove carbon from the atmosphere. And today we are piloting a new technology, a new app for us that allows you to support RMI and our work, our mission, immediately through the chat panel. Any amount helps. And thanks to some generous donors, all gifts that are made in the next 48 hours will be tripled up to $115,000. You heard me, tripled. That's a big deal. So please consider it as you see the panel on the side. And now to our speakers. In one moment, we'll get to them, but I just want to let you know we're going to have our discussion. We'll have about 15 minutes for Q&A. As always, put your Q&A, your questions in the Q&A function on your Zoom panel at the bottom, and our staff is putting them together, and we'll hope to get to as many as we possibly can over 15 minutes. There will be a recording of this event for those of you where you can't stay the whole time, or it moves too quickly and you want to re-listen, or you want to send it to friends, which would be fantastic. And following the Q&A, we will have Sir Richard Branson, our very special guest, who will be joined with our RMI Senior Principal, Vikram Singh, and offer his thoughts. So now let's welcome Taylor and Ian. There they are. There's Taylor. Hi, Taylor. There's Ian. Okay. Well, welcome both of you. I just would like to just kick us off by having you talk about what brought you to RMI, and then a little bit about what you've been doing, let's say, over the last year at RMI. Taylor, you wanna kick us off, please?
Sure. Hey, everyone. So in terms of what brought me to RMI, in a word, hydrogen. Some of you have probably seen my little hydrogen tattoo that I showed on Love is Blind, but I was actually recruited to lead RMI's hydrogen policy team. I was a lobbyist at a well-known government affairs firm in DC called Boundary Stone Partners, but I worked with RMI folks across a lot of clean energy topics during the IRA reconciliation process, which is just a long word for when the most comprehensive climate policy was being passed in the United States. There's a lot of people helping make that a possibility, and RMI were one of those organizations, and I just knew that they did an incredible job. And so when I had completed my master's degree at Johns Hopkins in energy policy, I did my thesis on hydrogen. And so some RMI colleagues knew that I had done that and wanted to become more of an expert in that field. So when a position opened up, I got recruited to do that. And so over the past year, I've been managing the federal policy team that has been working to decarbonize heavy industry using hydrogen and all of the different hydrogen policies that the government needs to bolster in order for that process to happen. I hope that was a good explanation.
We'll learn some more in the next few minutes. Thanks, Taylor. And Ian, how about you?
Sure. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. So what brought me to RMI? So I'd say prior to RMI, I used to live in London in the United Kingdom. Over the COVID pandemic, I ended up moving back to my home country of Trinidad and Tobago, a time of change for most of us. And I'd say when I came back to Trinidad, I had this burning desire to give back to my country, give back to my region, utilizing the skills that I'd gained working within renewable energy, battery storage, and the energy system in general. And when I was looking around for places to work and I say places that I can apply my skills, RMI, I came across RMI, and I would say the values, the type of work RMI does, the reputation within the industry and within the region was perfectly aligned with what I wanted to do and how I felt I could best give back to the region. And thankfully, I managed through my brother-in-law and a few other connections, spoke to some folks at RMI, heard a lot more about the great organization. And then I applied when a position opened up, and thankfully I was successful there. I'd say in terms of what I do or what I've done over the last year, so it's been quite a variety. So in the Islands team, we do a lot of work around policy, work with projects, and a lot of work with people as well. So over the last year, I would say I did some work analyzing the potential for battery storage in Belize to help drive additional renewable generation. I've done like pre-feasibility work for community solar in the Bahamas to try to provide more equitable benefits and access to the renewable energy and energy transition. I've also done some work in St. Lucia on developing critical facility microgrids on hospitals and schools. So I hope that gives you a bit of a flavor of what I've been up to.
Wow, you've been all over. Well, the first thing that those two introductions make me think about is this difference between local and big government. And following the U.S. elections, I know so many people are concerned about keeping our climate progress moving. And one way to do that, if the federal government isn't going to spend as much as it did most recently on the U.S. federal government, that is, on these efforts, is to work at a community level. And I'd like to hear a little bit about how your work is driving change on the community level. You talked a little bit already, Ian, and what potential it has to scale. Ian, maybe you could kick us off a little bit.
So happy to kick that one off. So I'll say within the context of the Caribbean, given that's where my team works, I'd say on a local community level, the primary concerns are to do with the cost of electricity and the resilience of the electricity system, and I'd say the wider society in general. So just to give you an idea, within the Caribbean, electricity prices are 3 to 5 times that in the US, and some of the most expensive in the world, right? When you look at the cost of renewable generation, for example, solar, that's 30 to 50% the cost of fossil fuel generation. Right now within the Caribbean, 90 to 95% of electricity generation is by fossil fuels, right? So it becomes a matter of lives and livelihood and wider socioeconomic factors. This isn't just about energy and decarbonization. It goes a lot deeper than that. So I'd say a lot of our work revolves around helping to, I'd say, drive down electricity costs for people in the Caribbean. The second factor is on the resilience front. So as we all know, climate change is creating an array of natural disasters across the world. So you have more tornadoes, you have more heat waves, larger cold spells. In the Caribbean, we have stronger and more ferocious hurricanes that are also more frequent. These, of course, destroy buildings, lives, livelihoods. And a big part of our work is ensuring the resilience of the electricity system by bringing distributed generation, such as solar and battery storage, onto critical facilities such as hospitals, schools, which act as hurricane shelters to essentially, I'd say, provide a more consistent backup where people can access services during and after natural disasters, driving benefit to wider life, not just the energy system.
That's big. So you've got both the economic benefit and the resiliency benefit for the communities after more and more natural disasters. That's outstanding. So that work will carry on. And Taylor, how about you? What is your thoughts about the localization or working more on community level?
Yeah, again, my expertise is federal policy, but local participation, it's integral. And so I might start at the federal impact and then weave in the local engagement. But federal investments, they play a crucial role in shaping the US economy. They did when we were building the grid and highways, and now in rebuilding the US industry and reducing reliance on oil and gas. So in the past 4 years, I've watched the US make historic investments in energy, semiconductors, manufacturing, and clean industrial production. And $126 billion have been invested in the last 2 years alone, which is supposed to be trickling down to or be invested into local economies. And this has led to significant changes in American competitiveness, with over 250 new facilities being started by the support of these climate funds to start innovative projects in local economies. A prime example being a steel plant innovation, which reduces local pollution caused by coal. And at RMI, we help create those practical strategies for supporting these new projects to be responsibly successful. Another example would be working with what are called EDOs, so economic development organizations, which are typically governmental organizations that work to improve the economic well-being and quality of life in specific regions, cities, or communities. You probably have an EDO officer that you just don't know, and they are the focus to foster economic growth by creating jobs, attracting investment, overall enhancing the local economy in which a lot of people live in. So RMI works with these organizations to collaborate with local governments, businesses, and communities to help make sure that these projects that the federal government is investing in are actually having the optimal local impact.
So that's great. So we have all those projects that were begun at the federal level and now will be taken over by communities, and then the opportunity to repeat them in other, you mentioned steel, and certainly if you do it in one steel plant, the others and the rest of the industry are gonna want to look and are gonna want to
Exactly.
copy. And hopefully we can be working at state level and community level to keep pushing always on this subject. Talking a little bit about the subject of partnerships. I know we have partnerships with industry associations. We have partnerships with groups of companies. We have partnerships with governments and with other kinds of local organizations and other INGOs. So talk a little bit about both of you partnerships in your work, and maybe Taylor will stay with you to kick us off on the subjects of how we use those collaborations to really drive and scale change.
Yeah, the energy transition, it's not a one-man show or woman. It's really a whole it's really a whole production, and it takes a talented team. Not just one organization is going to have the expertise or connections to make progress. At RMI, we are very partnership driven, which I think makes us very impactful. We have staff from, as you mentioned, the actual industries that we're supporting, but also from the government we're trying to inform, from the environmental world that's also supportive in our advocacy efforts, media, academia, honestly, the list goes on. But it really is together that we make progress. A tangible example from my team, we work on hydrogen policy, which is kind of this big meta thing in a lot of ways. And we know that it's integral for decarbonizing heavy industry, but we don't just work with the policymakers on a hydrogen policy. We work directly with developers to understand their deployment barriers, with financial institutions to understand their incentives, with on-the-ground coalitions, the finest environmental legal minds, states, federal researchers. I could probably keep listing off different partnerships, but I'm just trying to paint a picture of how comprehensive it is to pass impactful legislation and policy to be taken up by these local economies. So I know that was an example from my team, but I think RMI is so impactful and unique because this sentiment and collaboration is shared across the Institute and is not just my team.
And I can say from my own experiences in the transportation sector, where we're doing the engineering to change the vehicles themselves, that it doesn't work without the charging infrastructure or the hydrogen infrastructure. And you've got to have utilities ready with clean energy, and the grid comes into play. And there's just nothing one can do in isolation in this challenge. And so it's complicated work, but the little bits get heard about and scaled and copied, and that's our job. Ian, on the subject of partnerships, you've already talked a little bit about some of the community efforts that you're making. Maybe you can talk about how you get them copied, when, how do they work, first of all, maybe in a little bit more detail, and then how do you get them copied and scaled to other countries? Because you're working with a dozen or more countries in your region. That's a heavy lift.
Yeah, sure. So happy to give a bit more context there. So I'd say within the Caribbean region specifically, like as Taylor mentioned, collaboration is key, right? It's critical to the work we do. And I'd say RMI is unique in that we're able to act as a neutral broker for decarbonization, where we're able to thread the needle to adjust to government priorities, work with the needs of regulators, work with the impacts on the utility, and of course, the specific needs of the communities we're working in. Now, when it comes to scale, like you heard me mention before, that between 5 to 10% of electricity within the Caribbean is renewable energy. Now, if you take away 5 from 100, that leaves 90 to 95% that needs to be developed, right? So there's immense potential there. And that's before you even start to think about the different geographies, right? So there's scale by geography and scale by the volume and level of the need, right? And for that scale to happen, you need financing and you need projects, right? So to give an example of collaboration on terms of financing, so we've partnered with Cygnus Capital, which is a leading private equity firm within the Caribbean, to develop to partner on the CARICOM Resilience Fund. So this is a $100 million fund that is specifically designed to address specific areas to do with climate change and resilience. So energy is one part of it. It also looks at agriculture. It also looks at gender-specific areas. It also looks at clean energy. And what that enables is the facilitation of private capital and public capital to come in and get these projects developed. Workforce development is also critical within the Caribbean. So we've also partnered with CARILEC, which is the Caribbean utility gathering. And we've partnered with them to help develop capacity building, to work with leaders within the various institutions, such as utilities and the governments within the energy space, to build up their knowledge base to ensure sustainability of these projects going forward. And then on the projects front, I mean, you mentioned more than a dozen countries, but at my last check, it's over 20 now. So around 21.
Pushing 24, yeah.
Exactly. So we partnered with, I mean, a mix of like governments, regulators, utilities in over 20 countries throughout the Caribbean region.
And they're really interested in learning from each other, right?
Yes, that knowledge sharing
Yeah.
amongst countries is huge as well, especially given our similar position, both in terms of geography and size.
So in your case, you're not inventing new technologies, you're inventing new connections with people and unlocking funding to push them.
Yes.
Is that's what's happening. Great. Well, I would like to just ask you to reflect a little moment and tell me what you're most proud of in your years with RMI. What's your biggest compliment that you really want to tell your family about and your friends about that you're really excited about? Taylor, you want to go first?
Sure. Mine's maybe a little bit nerdy, but and niche, but I'm most proud of my team's contribution to creating what could be a vibrant clean hydrogen economy. You know, there's a joke amongst hydrogen nerds that the clean hydrogen economy has always been 10 years away for the past 50 years. So with this new policy that my team's been working really hard and has been very influential in the past 3 years, I truly believe that my team has helped make this more of reality. We've supported this novel hydrogen development at a state and federal level, and I think that that's really impactful. We've worked to address the market gap between policy development and financial investment, which we've talked about is really important for project deployment. And so I really believe that my team has played an impactful, if not integral role in making that dream of a clean hydrogen economy more of a closer reality.
And are there any other countries that are ahead of this thought process from who we're trying to emulate, or are others going to be looking to what you have done, your team has done?
The European hydrogen economy is, I would say, a lot more developed in a way, but the US has created a very large incentive, one that has actually shifted what some developers in Europe are doing. That policy is still in the works of being finalized, and I think has a bit of a ways to go to see if it stays. But there are other countries that are working on hydrogen, and it's still going to be a global commodity that's going to be traded across borders and is going to need different policy harmonizations and trade things to sort out.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Ian, what are you most proud of?
So I'd say probably two things, if you don't mind me jumping around.
You can have two.
Thank you.
20 countries, you can pick two. Yeah.
So I'd say the first thing is a bit more macro in the size of it. So when projects happen, they need to be prepared, right? So projects don't just appear out of thin air. They need to be prepared, as in you need to do the site analysis, you need to do the regulatory aspects, the engineering analysis before a project can happen. Now, within the Caribbean, that process can be very costly and results in the failure of many projects. Now, our team does a lot of project preparation to try to overcome this barrier. And there's a statistic of the leverage that is created. So every dollar of philanthropic funding that our team receives and funds our work brings in another $50 in private and public investment, right? And when you think of the leverage that creates and the forward momentum and sustainability of investment that can help create, and the impact it makes to everyday people all of the time within the region, for me, I'd say that's probably what I'm most proud of. And I'd say the second thing, so zooming in a bit on, for example, in St. Lucia, recently we did some studies to prepare the same project preparation process for 8 microgrids on critical facilities. So here we're looking at hospitals, water pumping, which covers 60% of the country, a number of schools, which act as emergency shelters. And now that those projects have been prepared, the first 2 are now going through that funding process to be constructed. And that will result in over 500 kids going to school, being powered with clean electricity. It would lead to a community of over 2,000 people having hurricane shelters that are powered 24/7. The solar panels on those facilities would be built to Category 5 standards, so to withstand Category 5 hurricanes, embedding that resilience and access to electricity during and after natural disasters. So I'd say that's sort of like tangible impact to people, and the leverage that we can create by our work is awesome to me.
So $1 of donation to RMI draws in $50 of private and public funding on projects. That's pretty good.
When it comes to project
And
preparation.
story of adaptation is just right on the mark, because we do have to adapt. We can't stop completely this phenomenon that we're facing. But that's a beautiful thing, both of you. Thank you. So I am sure you have both inspired a lot of people on this phone call to think about. I don't know how many people are still in their studies that are on this phone call, but probably a lot, or this video. And I hope that we've steered a few of them in your direction, just listening to your examples of your work and how much fun you're having and what a difference you're making. But and you've devoted your careers to addressing climate change, and for that, we and many more are very grateful. I just want to ask, as you meet other young people and circulate in your circles, do you have a sense that your generation is really feeling a particular calling to addressing this cause? And, do you have any advice for them, assuming that the answer is yes, about how people can get involved, whether it's activism, volunteerism, what they study, what their workplace is? What thoughts do you have for the young people on this call? And Ian, I think I'll stick with you to go first.
Sure. So I'd say there are a number of areas. So I'd say, from my point of view, like advocacy and activism has been growing massively and continues to be a strong part of helping push the agenda forward. Most young people are not in positions where they can directly influence policy or directly influence the actions of a government or corporation. So joining advocacy groups to push for priorities of the people or priorities of the youth is critically important. And I'd say the other big one would be volunteering and community action. So what we're starting to see, particularly within the Caribbean, for example, is volunteers for mangrove replanting, right? Like mangroves fortify the coast against storm surges, and they also sequester carbon or remove carbon from the atmosphere at a rate of 10 times more than your typical forest inlet, right? So volunteering for activities like those is also key. And then the last one I'd say is jobs, right? Like everyone needs employment. And what we've seen over the last few years is that the pace of development of new clean energy jobs is 2 to 3 times that of jobs in the wider economy, right? So these projects need to happen. We need to adapt. These things need to be built. And there's immense opportunity there within, I'd say, innovating around what type of jobs are there, what type of jobs can we do, what kind of startups can we create to target one specific area within the energy transition. So that's what I'd close with.
Good advice. And Taylor?
Yeah, I totally agree with Ian. And personally, I've just adopted the notion that action really is the antidote to anxiety and despair. Younger generations who I think are particularly attuned to the anxieties over time, they're really worried about climate change and they want to do something about it. I get a ton of messages from young people asking me to make more content about what a career in clean energy looks like. I don't think a lot of people can imagine what that exactly looks like. And I think, like Ian said, considering a job in clean energy really is one of the most impactful things that you can do, but that's not always accessible to everyone. So I do recommend also donating. A place like RMI is a great option, a place that's been doing the work. It will be doing the work. It is doing the work right now and is creating climate careers. And this also might just be, I think, a sidebar, but as I've stepped more into social media and trying to understand that, and that really is how a lot of people engage nowadays, I've been reviewing the data of who my followers are, and it seems to be women who are like me, and which are women from 25 to 40 in the United States. And I find this to be a really cool demographic because I also discovered it's the most powerful audience to have on social media because we have the most buying power. And I don't think a lot of women know that. And they probably saw my post on social media and why you're here today. And I just think we have a lot more power and influence to make an impact that we're even really aware of. So I'm actually a donor of RMI. I work at RMI, and I hope to be an example of what a woman working on climate change could look like.
Right. I would just kind of, as they say, double stomp on that last point about buying power and sitting on big company boards who are trying to do the right thing. And sometimes you're spending more money in the near term than your shareholders might want you to spend. But the more you hear from your customers that matters, that moving towards zero carbon matters, the more likely you are to stay steady and make the bigger short-term investments for the bigger long-term gain, and be more long-term in your thinking. So buying power and telling companies that you are really watching matters, and the leaders feel it all up and down. So with that, I think we should turn to Q&A. And there are lots of questions, but I get to pick out some of the fun ones. And I think, Ian, I just want to come back to the resiliency of the solar power and other forms of clean power in the Caribbean. And I presume a hurricane can destroy solar arrays just as easily as a building. Can you talk deeper about how you harden the solar arrays and the battery panels so that they don't get flooded and don't blow away and don't get destroyed in a hurricane? What is the Category 5 hardening of a project?
Sure. So this starts all the way I'd say during the project preparation process, when they're doing the analysis of the size and the type of assets that are required. So when it comes to hardening, I'd say from a battery storage perspective, ensuring adequate level above ground level. You do flooding analysis of the site, flooding analysis of the area to understand where best to put the asset. Now, batteries are very low risk of being blown away because they're bolted down into the ground on a platform off of ground level to prevent flooding damage. Now, solar panels is where it becomes a bit more tricky. So I'd say our team has done a lot of work over the years, looking at the damage that was caused to solar panels from other hurricanes in the past. So we have 2 reports, solar under Storm 1, solar under Storm 2, and we're in the process of developing solar under Storm 3, particularly in light of the continuing strengthening of hurricanes. Now, what those reports did is we got a team of engineers to go back and critically analyze a number of systems that were destroyed in previous hurricanes, found all of the various failure modes, and we're now designing systems to overcome those failure modes. So whether it be double clamping in areas, the panels are being placed closer together, having a wind shear barrier at the end of the roof in some cases, the tilting of the panels. So I say there are a number of small technical engineering aspects that we look at when designing the solar arrays. And then of course the type of panel you choose is super important as well, because some suppliers have panels which are lower wind rated. Those aren't panels we use. So there's a specific aim throughout the project development process to only look at panels from Tier A suppliers with a certain level of wind loading resistance.
Got it. So it's a continuous improvement project, and sounds
Yes.
like. And Taylor, one of the audience burning questions was for you was, what do you think are the best uses of hydrogen in decarbonizing the economy? And, you can be, what might be first and easiest, and best might be what is the biggest carbon impact, might be what's the most economic. Maybe you can articulate a little bit how you think of what you think will be the beginning users and how that should look. Maybe talk
Yeah.
about green steel or something. Yeah.
Sure. So I hate to say the answer, it depends. I think it really depends exactly where you are in the country and what is in need of being decarbonized. So hydrogen as a fuel should be used to be a replacement for a process that otherwise can't be directly electrified. Um, some examples of those are shipping, but there's already infrastructures in place for some of these technologies that it doesn't necessarily, it's not always feasible to transfer an entire fleet of shipping to become a hydrogen fleet, or for light duty cars, for example. There's already electrification infrastructure there for different light duty cars, but there's heavy duty vehicles that can be used for that hydrogen can be used as a replacement. There are also a multitude of hydrogen hubs across the country that are different in different regions right now that have just been awarded funding that are being used to scale hydrogen in different regions. And it's going to look very different in terms of how you create clean energy in California versus Texas. It depends where on the grid you are to create your hydrogen and what incumbent technologies are there right now. So hydrogen really should be used to decarbonize heavy industry processes rather than making it for power generation. But I think there's different economies of scale right now that we're balancing. So I wouldn't want to say that there's necessarily specific like technologies right now.
One right
Yeah,
answer.
there's
Yeah.
one right answer. I'd hate to say that and then be totally wrong.
So hopefully the team can maybe put a link to an article for people to dive deeper to say, okay, I live in Georgia. What do I need to be looking for and lobbying for in Georgia? For people to get a little smarter on that so they can help pull and push and talk about it. John, I'll get to you in a minute, but I just want to ask the two of you, what's your best advice to respond to people who are completely skeptical about the clean energy economy ever being economic, or some don't even think it's required. But how do you convince skeptics about the work that we're doing?
I
Tough
don't.
one. Go. You don't.
I think there's such a critical mass of people and investors and project developers in the real world, dollars that are going into these projects, billions, if not trillions. And so I think following the large scale investment and policy decision makers that see that and they're making it a reality are the people that I usually spend time talking to than arguing with a very small percent. I feel like it's a very small percent of skeptics.
Ian, do you have any thoughts on that subject?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'll try to simplify it and keep it short. Economics don't lie, and the change is coming, right? Like, if we were to be perfectly real and consider all of the full costs, whether it be carbon externalities, etc., of fossil fuel generation versus renewable energy generation will win every time, right? And I always direct people who say, oh, but what about a market-based approach and stuff like that? I always say, like, look at Texas, right? Texas, the state of oil, they also have one of the highest renewable penetrations in the US. There's building solar after solar after solar, have one of the largest battery fleets in the US. And why is that? Because of economics, right? So for me, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. Like, the change is coming. You can go onto Amazon and buy a solar and battery to power your camper van for a weekend. That costs less than a generator, right? So it's just more, I think, about public education, public knowledge, public understanding, because the change is coming, right? So I think I'll leave it at that.
That's great. I want one of those. I didn't know that they existed, but that would be fun. John, I want to turn to you. Thank you for popping back in. Obviously, people who have known us for a long time had the burning question of, what is RMI going to do differently with the new administration? And I don't know anybody better to answer that question than you. Tell us what we have to change and what we get to keep doing with the new administration in the United States.
Yeah, no, I know it is on everyone's mind here, Martha. The first thing I would acknowledge is exactly what you said. RMI's been around a long time, 43 years now, and we've seen many administrations on both sides of the aisle. And we're an independent nonprofit, and we're nonpartisan in the end, so we work equally with both sides of the aisle, in part because we really do look for that economic value in the end. We look for ways to drive business-led, market-led change that affects and builds communities in the right way as well. And so this is very much front and center for us as we think about what the new administration may bring in. As Ian has said, when we look at where the clean energy revolution is right now, or the changes, renewables, when we look at solar and wind, they're the cheapest form of new energy for 85% of the people on the planet, right? And that's true in the United States as well, that there are just compelling reasons why Texas is building out renewables at scale and using it as a primary source of energy. There's compelling reasons why individuals are moving to EVs now, because it's, for about half the people in the country, it's the most economic way to get around and meet their mobility needs. These opportunities are only going to improve. And when we look at areas like industry and the new opportunities that Taylor is talking about with hydrogen, these are opportunities for the United States to lead and help create the next energy economy. And so for all of these reasons, we think the next administration should be very interested in how to embrace and build up clean energy solutions as part of a national strategy. And if that's not the case, right, we will absolutely work at the subnational level, at the state level, at the community level on an ongoing basis, where RMI does significant amounts of work today, because the jobs are there, the community benefits are there, the enthusiasm and the desire to build up this new innovative economy is very much there. And RMI will go and help put those solutions in place and make the practical change that really so many people are craving right now, and that is economically the right way for us to go. It makes all of our communities better. And that is what we're trying to support and unlock here with RMI.
Jobs, economics, resiliency, and just kind of the direction we're all headed. We're all aiming to stay on planet Earth for some
If you
long
believe
period
in
of
any
time.
one of those, Martha, right? If you want
Yeah.
any one of those,
Yeah.
you can be supporting RMI. And if you want all of them, then let's get going, right? We can deliver all of those benefits simultaneously. So it's an exciting story, and it's never, the economics and the opportunity have never been better than they are today. So, but we just need to support, we need to change people's thinking a little bit. We need to help them understand the numbers. We need to help them understand the solutions. And then we need to get busy and get it done.
That's right. And that's what we're good at. And I guess I would also just tell everybody in the call that we are not a heavily government funded organization. It's less than 10% of our funding. Anyway, we try to get the government to spend in the direction that to projects we want to, but it doesn't necessarily come to us very much. So rely on private donations, people like you, to help us keep doing what we're doing out there. I think we are just about ready to turn to Vikram, if that's okay. I know I left a few questions on the table. Taylor, Ian, fantastic job. Can't wait to meet you in the flesh sometime soon. Keep up the really, really, really great work. We're proud of you both. So thank you. And I would like everybody to welcome Vikram here. Vikram is going to guide us through a conversation with Sir Richard, who I hope is also here. I'm waiting to see his face. Vikram, you want to, oh, there he is. Wonderful. Vikram, can you take it away?
I can. Thank you so much. Thank you, Martha. Thank you, John. And especially to Taylor and Ian, you know, it's an honor to be associated with your work, perhaps a humble enabler of your work globally. Speaking of enablers of global work, it's a sincere pleasure to welcome Sir Richard Branson here to this discussion. He is a man that needs no introduction, but allow me a few sentences for those who are not familiar with Sir Richard. He's been a global leader across a host of industries and a daring adventurer when it comes to pushing the boundaries of air travel, which accounts for about 2.5 to 3% of global CO2 emissions. Certainly not Virgin and Sir Richard alone, and hopefully time allowing, we'll get to some of the solutions he's been thinking about there. Moreover, Sir Richard has been a generous donor of his time, resources, and influence to drive global change in the 21st century and perhaps even beyond. Sir Richard, welcome.
Thank you very much. Lovely to talk to you again.
Lovely to talk to you. I have two, perhaps three questions, time permitting. But you've just been hearing from Taylor and Ian, two emerging leaders at RMI, each with their unique perspectives on the global energy transition. In your mind, what is the importance of young leaders in the climate movement and the commitment that we have to the next generation?
Well, when I was 16, I set up a national magazine for young people to give a voice to young people and to challenge perceptions of youth culture. And through the work of Virgin Unite, we've always been committed to collaboration across generations, knowing the immense impact that young people can have in tackling some of the world's toughest challenges. And the problems we face today mean it really has never been more important to make sure that young people are front and center in that conversation. We owe it to our children, we owe it to our grandchildren, and we owe it to future generations to come. One great example of centering youth activism, I think, has been Planetary Guardians, which is a collaboration between Virgin Unite and a number of other incredible partners, which launched last year. And Planetary Guardians is built on this very principle, with young leaders like Zai Bastida and Aisha, I can never pronounce her name, Siddiqa, serving alongside global icons like Mary Robinson and Juan Manuel Santos. And Virgin Unite is committed to supporting youth activism, including in the climate movement. And it recently announced a new collaboration with We Are Family Foundation, Big Change and One Young World, to create a space for youth leadership to partner on key projects, co-creating solutions to some of the world's toughest problems, like the ones that you tackle every day.
So Richard, thank you for that. You talk a little bit there about youth engagement, how important it is, and how important it's been to your career. I think in the current state of play, it's easy to feel a great deal of climate-related anxiety. What would you say to young people who are feeling that today around the world?
I think it's completely understandable that young people would be feeling anxious and helpless about the state of the climate. And life on our planet, I think, does hang in the balance, despite all the work that you and your team have been doing. It's not just climate change. I mean, you need to think flooding in Central Europe and Spain, or catastrophic wildfires, as we saw on the news today. It's also rapid loss of biodiversity, and it's the extinction of species, which I think, to me, should be categorized as a sin. The loss of fresh water, or deforestation, which is still sadly happening at a rapid rate. So our shared home, the planet, it is on red alert. But despite this unsettling state of affairs, there is hope. In September, I was with the Planetary Guardians at the launch of the Planetary Health Check, which is a first of its kind scientific report and tool for the health of the Earth's vital systems that serve as humanity's life support system. And the health check is based on Johan Rostrom's work on planetary boundaries. And it's very important because it gives us a comprehensive, it gives us a scientific evidence-based picture of what is going wrong and what we need to do to fix it. And the remarkable collaboration that led to the restoration of the Earth's ozone layer many years ago, I think, gives us hope that we can reverse the damage done. Back in the 1980s and 90s, the state of stratospheric ozone, one of the planetary boundaries, was of understandable growing public concern. But then the world got together. They created the Montreal Protocol, which was a triumph of collaboration between science, governments, multilaterals, and business. And it transformed entire industries. It invested in science to track and understand the problem, and it phased out 99% of ozone depleting substances. And scientists now predict that the ozone layer will largely be restored. If we can measure the impact, we can all work together as planetary guardians to find the solutions to the problems we face. This is both a moment, I think, of huge possibility and a race against catastrophic climate impact. And the right outcome depends on all of us stepping up to embrace sustainable change in these critical next 6 years.
Thank you, Sir Richard. Anyone who spent any time with you knows that you quickly inspire us to think about the stratosphere and air travel. Last November, a Virgin Atlantic plane successfully completed the world's first transatlantic flight powered solely by sustainable aviation fuel. You were on that historic flight alongside my RMI colleagues Joey Cathcart and Thomas Coq-Blanc. Tell us about that experience, and how can we ensure that this is not a one-off event, but really the start of a new paradigm?
So, yeah, before I get into the details of that, I would just like to say something about RMI. I mean, RMI, I've been lucky enough to be involved with for many years now. We merged the Carbon War Room into RMI, and I would say there is no organization in the world that has done more to reverse the climate change than RMI. Whether you look at China, whether you look at the airline industry, whether you look at rainforests. I mean, you really are the organization, I think, that can save the world, and it's been a tremendous honor to have been involved with you in a small way over the years. But going back to the airline industry, change happens slowly at first, and then faster than we ever thought possible. So we've seen rapid transformations before in history, from the Industrial Revolution right through to the Information Revolution. And now we're at the beginning of the renewables revolution. And I think RMI really led us on that. I was so proud to be on board Virgin Atlantic's Flight 100, which was the world's first 100% sustainable aviation fuel transatlantic flight by a commercial airline. And people had all said that it would be impossible for a plane powered solely on SAF to go, to go the whole way from across the Atlantic. And the world always assumes something can't be done until it's done. So the spirit of innovation, I think, is getting out there and trying to prove that we can do things better for everyone's benefit. So it was a huge well done to all the team at Virgin Atlantic, to all of our partners, particularly RMI, for coming together and making it happen. And now we've shown that it can work. It will take industry and governments to make it an everyday reality. So sometimes you just must show the world something can be done to then spur action. And this flight will hopefully achieve that. It will take everyone coming together, including the fuel industry and governments, to make sustainable aviation fuel a complete reality. But then it will protect our planet and it will benefit literally everybody. So, this is one of the defining challenges of the aviation sector. And I'm delighted that our team working with RMI, pushed for this revolution and this innovation. And it's been a great pleasure working with you.
Thank you, Sir Richard, for your valuable time and
Wow.
your inspiration. With that, I'm going to hand it back over to Martha, with thanks again to our colleagues at Virgin and all that you do.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.
Vikram, Sir Richard, thank you so very much. Those were daunting words to hear. I both delighted to hear your compliments to the organization and feel a little weight on the shoulders for all that can be expected of this group. But I think they're up to it.
You're certainly up to it. Anyway, good luck. Cheers.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah.
Bye.
So all of you, thank you for joining us. I hope you learned a thing or two. I hope you are inspired to support our work. I'll remind you that every dollar that's donated gets matched with $3 up to $115,000. This is an important piece of work, and we only exist because you support us. So if you haven't had a chance to use the app or work with this code here, want to do it another way, obviously you can go to our website, rmi.org/give now. And we appreciate you joining. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you again. Take care, everybody. Happy holidays.